Welcome to this lecture. Our main aim now is to see how can we create box plots using qplot. First, let's look at this dataset that we're going to use. Plant growth. Right, so if you come here on the help tab, so this dataset contains the results from an experiment on plant growth. So we have two variables in this case. We have weight, which is numeric, and we have group. Okay, so the level of groups are, this is the control and this is treatment 1 and treatment 2. So we want to see how can we visualize this data set using box and whisker plot. So let's start. So what we want to do is we want to use qplot. Okay, so first let's come in here and say the head this data set, plant growth. So you can observe, so we have these two variables. Also, if you can look at the structure of this data set, you observe here that we have group, which is already a vector, right? So it has 3 vector level, which is the control, treatment 1 and treatment 2. Okay, so let's see. Now we want to visualize, say for example, group. We want to use group in the x-axis and then weight. And then we specify our data set, which is plant growth, right? Remember, we have to specify that we want a box plot, right? So let's see. If you run this, come in here. Now this here is your box plot. As you observe here on the x-axis is that this here is a box plot for the control, for treatment 1 and for the second treatment, right? Now let us see how can we add colors in this case, right? So in order to add colors, you can come in here and say fill by group, right? So if we say fill by group, so what will happen in this case is that we will fill the colors by group. So for each group, we will have different color. And if you notice here, you come here, you notice that, as I did mention before, that when it comes to ggplot2, even in here, in the case of qplot, we don't even have to specify, or we don't even have to create a legend. But later, in a later stage, we also want to see how can we create our own legends using ggplot2. Okay, but for now, we are just understanding how can we visualize data sets using qplot if we want to have a box and whisker. Okay, now let's say you want this plot called violin plot. Now, in order to visualize our data set using violin plots, we're going to come here and say, let's say we start with violin. And if you run this, so here is an example of a violin plot, right? So a violin plot in most cases, as I did mention, that it specifies the peaks in our data. Okay, so we can also add color and say fill by group, right? And if you run this, you notice that now this violin plot is now filled by group, okay, using colors. We can also have this argument trim. So what this argument does is that the default one is true, right? Which means it trims the tails of the violin to the range of the data. However, if we set this to false, let's set this to false and let's run this. So what happened is that if this additional argument is set to false, we are saying don't trim the tails. However, if it's true, notice here you say trim the tails of the violin to the range of the data. So this here is a simple example of how you can use qplot in order to visualize a box plot, and how can you visualize your data using a violin plot.